Right, I'm with Rob Duhamel, well-known political figure.
Yes.
Still thinking about politics, I hope.
Well, I'm thinking about politics. I don't know about thinking about being back in politics. Although, I suppose once you've been in, you never really kind of leave, do you?
The Mother of Parliament is in a state of ill health at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same ill health that we've got?
I think it is, basically. I mean, the UK government, I think, has moved to a system whereby less people are involved in making the decisions. And inevitably, if you've got a party system, it makes things a little bit easier. Over here we don't. We've taken on the same system, and the central decision-making powers of the States Assembly have almost or virtually disappeared.
One of the strange things is the debate that's been going on now for the past 2 years. 650 MPs, some of them the most intelligent people in the land, we have to accept that, some of them not. Eloquent speakers, the actual presentation, it's almost becoming like EastEnders. It's quite popular television to watch these debates now. But of course they're not getting anywhere, as we all know. It's going round and round and round in circles. Are those people, I mean, they are a lot of very talented people, are they the same as you? In other words, if you were elected to that assembly, could you cope with that?
I think I could, but I think everybody as politician has to carve out a particular niche, and or actually accept that you're just going to be there as a single voice and not have as much influence. So if you can actually find a group of people who are kind of collectively involved in making decisions that you think you can have some sway in, then fair enough. But that doesn't always happen, and in Jersey in particular it doesn't happen. For example, I had a background in education, and when I first entered in politics, the last committee they wanted me on was the education department, because I knew too much about education.
Because obviously Jersey is about the size of a large constituency over there. They get one representative. I know they got a whole substructure of different levels of local councils and all the rest of it. But here you could be, if you were the representative for, just to analyse it slightly, there was a recent by-election here for one seat, 9 candidates. Now all those candidates in a Jersey context were quite capable of doing the job of a local deputy. They were all quite capable of doing it. But are we of the calibre? That's why I can't quite grasp. Some of those people in Parliament are some very bright people. Well, how do we equate with that? Are we the same as that?
I think there are some people who've got a technical training that would be of benefit to those departments that they're going to work in. But as I said, over here, the Jersey way seems to be to exclude.
Because we're wanting 49 elected members, or supposedly elected members. In an island of this size, is it realistic to look for 49 people to be able
I think it probably is realistic, but I think the organisation should be done in a different way. Instead of actually choosing somebody to be a representative and then not knowing what their interests are or knowing what their abilities are to deliver, and then you get them in hoping, keeping your fingers crossed that they're going to be sitting on the ministerial group or whatever, making those decisions, only to find that they haven't got the personal skills to rub shoulders with the people who are actually doing the job.
The Chief Minister was in scrutiny again this morning, and I saw him briefly on the screen, and he was sitting there alongside Charlie Parker, wasn't there, who seems to be at every important meeting you see. But the Chief Minister was very, very vague about reform of the political system, and the Speaker. I mean, look at the Speaker they've got in the UK, an amazing guy. I mean, we couldn't aspire to get anybody of that quality, could we? The Speaker, John Bercow, he's just amazing how he runs his show, isn't he?
Well, he's a bit of a bully, but
he is a bully, and he loves the sound of his own voice. Yes, we understand all that.
And he was going, right, but he hasn't gone.
He hasn't gone.
They all said he had to be out by what was it?
Under a cloud he's going. He's under a cloud.
He's still here.
Yes.
No. I think the thing is, I mean, government has changed, and I think if you want people who just want to be a parish deputy or whatever, and to be a glorified social worker, then that's fine. I think most people with their family connections could do that. If you want somebody who's got some technical expertise, who can work alongside kind of the civil servant professionals, in a way to kind of convert the requests of the public into the policy directions for that department, then that requires a person who's a different kettle of fish. And I think you're possibly right in saying that we don't have as many people who fall into that category.
Well, our expectation, I think, is too high for what we're trying to do on International Finance Centre. But the UK wanted to break with Brexit, according to the referendum, in order they could run their own show. Evidently, on the current show, they can't run their own show. They're totally incapable of making a decision with the decision they've got to make. It shows that it's a flawed aspiration to run your own show.
Well, no, I think that's one way of looking at it. But I think more importantly, I think it shows that the voting system is possibly as much to blame as anything else.
Right.
We had similar things when Mike Vibert, before he died years ago, came forward with an amendment to kind of ensure that there was a proper majority, not a 2/3 majority as you have with the American kind of big constitutional fair issues or whatever, but for ordinary run-of-the-mill decisions, he said that we really needed a proper majority, not just kind of deciding by one. Now, I think this is really at the root of what's gone wrong in the UK. You put it to the people. You didn't give the people kind of as much information on which they could make a sensible decision. You allowed individual politicians to go out and actually fabricate the news and the story. We had the battle bus set up and saying that we were going to be getting back kind of billions of pounds to kind of reinvest in the health service. All of that was a total utter lie and fabrication, and people were taken in by it to such an extent that the vote was pretty much 50-50. Now at that point, right, in any decision making process, and there's a whole stash of mathematics behind it, as you would expect, so that's where I've come from, but to make decisions when you've got almost the status quo, it's going to be a poor decision.
Right.
Yeah. So you need the decision structure, I think, to be such that it's robust enough to actually carry a sensible majority.
The Chief Minister this morning repeated the same thing, that Parliament, UK Parliament, cannot legislate for Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I totally disagree with that. I think history, for hundreds of years, has shown quite to the contrary.
I think
Parliament
they
can and does.
I think they can and they could, but there'd be some constitutional kind of big argument over it.
Well, the big result would be UDI, wouldn't it? I mean, and they have been talking about it over a simple little issue of disclosure of information, this publication. On that issue, the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man have been looking at independence on that issue alone. So all this stuff about loyalty to the Crown and so on, basically it's meaningless, isn't it? When it comes to the crunch now, because we're all finance centres, that's the determination, isn't it? It's finance. That's what rules the game.
It does, and it's wrong. And I was a little bit annoyed the other day when we had Senator Gorst kind of suggesting that we should get rid of the bailiff and change ourselves from having been a bailiwick for all those years and to be moving towards setting up a confederacy or confederation of Channel Island.
Do you not think that is part of the UK's plan?
I think it is.
And that the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man should be pushed out a little bit so that the UK can stand back and say, because they've been pushing this to develop your international, your own identity. They've been pushing that for years, the agenda. And if the UK could say, nothing to do with us, if they carry on their finance industries.
I think there could be something there, because certainly with some of my research, I was most annoyed when I was looking at the some of the international agreements that we'd been told to step in line with, and I thought they'd been ratified in our name, only to be told by previous bailiffs that that wasn't actually the case, and that we still needed permissions of the UK in any of these big things.
Well,
bail condition in particular. I mean, I was heavily into trying to ensure that the island did as much as it could to recycle materials, only to be told that we couldn't actually take, for example, the asbestos materials that the previous chief executive wanted to store and bury down at Laconnet in an active state at a huge expense. We could have actually, under the Basel Convention, signed up an agreement with any other Bâle Convention signatory, and there were quite a few, and I went to France to actually negotiate a deal, and only to be told that we couldn't do it because we'd need to actually have our kind of waste arisings come under the UK figures.
You're making me divert a bit because you mentioned the word convention, which is one of my hobby horses. You were planning minister, or whatever. They haven't got a planning minister now. You inherited an island plan. You had it. In that island plan, in the preamble, it said there were 350 international conventions, treaties and obligations which we have to comply. Did you ever know what they were?
Yes.
Because I can't get a list of them. I've asked, most they can find is 71.
No, well, I don't. Well, you're right.
Does anybody know where they are?
It's not 350, but 71.
Well, that's what it says in the island plan.
Yeah. Well, in that case, if you're up to 350, there are probably minor things in there which are being classified as a proper.
And that was a list of 20 years ago, so it'll probably be even more the way these things sort of.
But the bigger issues that we're asked to sign up to, I mean, we're either doing it in our own name or we're not. And you're right, having been told that Jersey was expected to actually operate in its own capacity more and more, I find it particularly galling, even now, right, thinking back that in my time, that wasn't the case, and we still had to have the permission of the UK, and it's probably the same thing here.
I wonder, as cameraman, if I can just ask a quick question.
Go on, then.
It's for both of you, really, I suppose. If, as our states tell us, or our establishment tell us, that the UK can't legislate for us without our consent, this is a burning question. How is it that all our legislation passed in our legislator has to be approved by the Privy Council? So this is what I don't understand. We don't legislate for ourselves. We only legislate, this is the way I read it, we only legislate with the rubber stamp of the Privy Council. We don't legislate for ourselves, do we? The UK does, in effect, legislate for us.
No, I don't think so. And I think it goes back to when the government was actually the king or the queen.
Right.
Yeah. So at the moment, because we're a crown peculiar, you could say that Queen Elizabeth, she's there. She has her own government, and she's not entitled in the same way as you're suggesting to kind of stop her parliament from doing anything in particular.
So,
although it's her parliament, and her parliament are actually doing the things that supposedly she's still allowed to do.
Well, the monarch was locked out of parliament in 1642 when Charles tried to go in there and arrest some of the parliamentarians, and he was expelled from the parliament, and that's it. The Queen's no longer. Ever since, the king or queen has not been allowed to go into parliament. So I mean, that's the sort of theatrical basis on which it applies.
But I think, going back to your original point, I think the system is broken, and as the world gets kind of more and more complex, and with computers performing kind of more and more kind of fantastic things, I think the general public are getting to the point now where they're saying, do we actually need to actually place all our faith and trust in people on the basis of whatever they tell us at election time, only then to find out that they're not experts, they're not representing us properly, or they're doing things worse to actually kind of implement things that they know, had they mentioned at the election, that they wouldn't have been elected for. So I think the whole world is going to be moving before long, before a system of government that allows the decision making to actually filter down to the ordinary person in the street.
Well, I don't know actually what goes on in China, but presumably the government of China says it's going to do something and it does it. But obviously places like America, Mr. Trump, or President Trump, said he's going to build the wall and then he found he couldn't. I mean, it's a dilemma for countries of huge size and tiny little places like Jersey, isn't it? You say you're going to do something, how do you do it? How do you do it?
Yeah, but the thing is, the public can do whatever they want to do. We pay our taxes. It's the tax money that actually goes to fund these things. If we actually decided that our elected representatives wanted to actually deliver something that we didn't wish to happen, then presumably there'd be nothing to stop us saying, right, okay, you're not getting the tax.
The classic thing in Jersey, the worked example again, which was on your, why was there never an island plan which showed us where the hospital ought to be? It never was so, was it?
That's an interesting point.
Hey?
I was talking about that to somebody else just before I came here, right? what people don't realise is that when Cohen and I came forward in 2012 with the new Island Plan, at that point it was asked of the health representatives whether or not they'd be looking for a new hospital. They weren't at that time, somewhat bizarrely.
But it was being talked about.
It was being spoken about in hushed tones,
yeah,
behind closed doors. But the process that had to be followed was the planning minister at the time, Freddie Cohen, had to ask the other ministers whether or not there were any significant kind of changes that need to be worked into the new 10-year plan. At that point, we were told no. So what we did was, and I know we did it because I was there helping him, well, we actually put in a catch-all set of provisions, which actually said that should the health department change their mind or come to the conclusion that there were extra hospital buildings for a new hospital, this, that or the other, right, moving the mental hospital facilities, what have you, there'd obviously be a requirement that had to be built into the Island Plan to know where the sites would be. So what we put in, and it's quite clearly there, it says that these new building provisions would only go on land that was being used for similar services, and under no circumstances would we actually move facilities that weren't completely outworn or knock down buildings if they had some future refurbished use.
And was that a wrong-headed thing to say?
No, I don't think it was, because we'd actually been through the process. Freddie Cohen was the first minister to actually agree that amendments could be brought by other members in his name, but allowing other states members to get involved, because at the time there were a number of people who thought that the planning minister had too much power, and you virtually had an unelected, if you like, dictatorship telling you what you could or couldn't have. So he was pretty keen to actually widen the process. Now, a lot of people don't realise this, and but they all actually voted for the Island Plan with those provisions in. In 2013, after we convened the new government, it was brought to my attention at one of the council of ministers meetings that the Treasury Minister had decided to go out and actually choose a site. And he'd actually commissioned some work because he wanted to organise all of the big projects from a Treasury perspective, and not because he'd had.
Well, he fixed a sum of money. That's what you're going to build it for eventually.
Yeah. But in essence, what he'd had his difficulties, and again, people have forgotten. And his difficulties with Cohen were down to his having kind of worked with the planning minister at the time to actually choose a site for the police station.
Right.
And
well, you don't want police station because this little island, this little microcosm of government, there's these huge problems which are keep like housing, police station, hospital, schools, all these very major projects. Somehow or other we have great difficulty in deciding what to do.
But we do. But I'm trying to kind of fill in why it went wrong, right? So having actually received a whole load of public criticism for working with the planning minister, who wasn't re-elected. Yeah, I became the planning minister. He'd had difficulties working with Freddie Cohen. Freddie Cohen lost his job and ended up with health problems, and nobody wanted to touch him anymore. Right. And then Joseph managed to actually become Treasury Minister.
But as it happened,
at that point,
from the capitalist point of view, this island's reality, they picked the worst possible planning office because you had an environmental conscience. I mean, you were going to have all sorts of battles with them.
No, I don't agree. I think they probably chose, without being too big-headed, I think they chose the best person to be the planning minister, because planning isn't just a function of what you spend. It's balancing the environment, the social and the economic desires of the island within a workable plan that's agreed centrally in the States Assembly by everybody.
It was a wrong-headed plan because it harks back to tradition and so on, which we can now see collapsing all around us. Farming, the use of farmland, the use of land with this priority for agricultural purposes, when agriculture is
but
never been in such a sense.
It's not a plan that's actually presented by the planning minister, and that's what you get. It's a plan that's actually formulated by all states members, and the public, and the number of meetings that we had to actually come forward with the policies, it was huge. We were all on different working parties.
I understand.
So for me, it's fundamentally the most democratic of processes, our island plan, and that's the very thing that the new government have actually allowed Mr. Parker to come in and to push to one side. And it's going to cause bigger problems. We can't have growth, housing and the economy looking after the island plan.
Well, we've seen just today there's been a release of information about the Children's Commissioner and the failure of what apparently, I mean, she was supposed to write her own law, but all of a sudden...
I think possibly we've chosen somebody who thinks that she should be wanting to actually do the job without having any input from
the report came out, said you should have a children's commissioner. It actually said you shouldn't have a children's minister. We've now got both, and we've got a director general, and we've got Charlie Parker also. We've got so many people now with a hat on that relates to children's services, whereas it was supposed to be a children's commissioner. That was it, with all powerful, all singing, all dancing.
And these are the very problems that you mentioned about having a government making the decisions and not having any reliance on a parliament to actually make those decisions for you.
So we're back to where we were. This is why it's essential the UK government has the power to govern Jersey, because when it gets itself into a terrible mess, as it does from time to time.
I don't think that's one way of looking at it. That could happen, but if you did that, you'd have to return a Channel Island or several Channel Island MPs to actually sit in the House. And we'd have to have an equal part to play alongside.
Would that be so bad?
I don't think it would be so bad, particularly. But you speak to a lot of islanders. They're headstrong. They think that they know best, and they have to be allowed to do it.
We had a parliamentarian over this week. He's a Lord Dubbs, talking about children's refugees, and you can feel the animosity from some traditional quarters in Jersey, about the fact this is interference. This is not something we want.
I think it was interference, gross interference, and it's fundamentally wrong. Right, knowing the setup, it's fundamentally wrong to have UK politicians coming over here telling us how to keep our affairs in order. It's wrong, absolutely wrong.
But the strange thing is, with Charlie Parker and his team, there's a big animosity towards the fact that they are UK origin. This is, I mean, even with Gorst, his chief minister, there was quite a strong feeling. Oh, he's from England. What does he know? Is this? I mean, I find this. I mean, I'm from the UK. I find this. It doesn't annoy me really, but I just find it rather frustrating that people would think like that.
No, I don't. I don't.
You share that view. You feel some antagonism towards.
I think I share that view mainly because of the statements that have been made. I mean, these people are saying that. The latest pronouncement in the JEP was that we didn't have enough local talent to be doing the top jobs.
Well, yes, I would disagree with that fact. There's a population here, and all these jobs can be done. But
we've got reorganisation changes that have been made, to the extent that the ministers who normally were working within their own departments, as set up by the States of Jersey law, which hasn't been changed as yet, now actually having to accept that they need to hot desk in Broad Street, right, in premises that I'm told, and I've seen pictures of, don't have any internal windows, light or ventilation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the only people who have offices to work from is the chief minister, the deputy chief minister, the chief executive from the civil service, and I think Farnham, Senator Farnham managed to wangle himself a position, as he got a shared office somewhere. But everybody else, despite their authority and the expectation that they need to have separate offices for nothing else other than perhaps to preserve the confidentiality of the things that are being said within the department, they can't do it.
I mean, having been a planning minister, how can we say that buildings like Market House, which have only been there since the 1970s, are no longer fit for... They're planning to demolish it. I mean, how can you do that? How can that be acceptable?
They're fit for the purpose that they were designed to work in. So to be actually arguing that they're no longer fit for any type of office work is the wrong argument. It's not a true argument. those buildings are serviceable. But the argument has always been one of, do you have open plan offices where people can drift in and drift out, or do you have kind of closed off?
Well, Fort Region was a fort, but we can't perpetuate its use as a fort, can we?
No, I agree.
I mean, the buildings have to be adapted for what they are.
Yeah, but we had the same thing with in Halkett Street, the offices there. It was exactly the same argument. When the state's kind of property department kind of built the premises, there was always the intention that everything was going to be open plan, and then one of the departments, I'm not going to drop a minute and name them, but you can easily find out, one of the departments said, no, over my dead body I need to have kind of different facilities closed in to preserve the anonymity of the discussions and the things that were being said. Also, you didn't have open plan.
I mean, it is a weird situation, because every country you look at Macron over there, he's in an incredible situation. You've got people rioting on the streets, which I know is a French tradition, but that's what's going on over there. But lots of countries, you've had Greece the other day, it was in the state of economic collapse. Spain was nearly in economic collapse.
Yeah.
What is going wrong with the world, and why is it we are so? I mean, I don't suppose we were ever able to democratically rule places, were we? That was always a problem. It was always a dictatorship of some sort, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably. And I think with the UK and the Brits, I mean, there is this kind of lost empire thing going on, and a lot of people are looking back in through their tinted glasses and saying, well, things were better off then, when we could actually just waltz into anybody's
And ironically, Jersey, the finance centres, are turned into little mini colonialist states, because they're going out around the world looking for third world countries where they can get involved and help to exploit. They say help to exploit, but basically it's just for straightforward capitalist exploitation of the resources of those countries, and they want a share of it. It's old-fashioned colonialism, isn't it?
It is.
And that's what we're involved in.
Yeah. And I think we have to realise there's a pretty good TV programme where they're going around the world on $5,000 or whatever, and it's a real eye-opener, because or should be for a lot of people. We think Jersey's really big and at the centre of the universe, and I think the UK probably shares that as well, and as a general feeling.
Right.
But when you look at these trains kind of travelling kind of hundreds, thousands of miles, going to kind of really developed places. I mean, Azerbaijan, right? They're in Baku, right? They're going into China, right? And you see the vibrancy of the cultures.
We've got the map of the world behind us. I don't know what year that map of the world is.
Well,
it's a view of the world.
It's a view of the world, but for a lot of Brits, it's painted the wrong colour, isn't it? It should be pink.
Realistically, for Jersey, I mean, okay, you're a Jersey person and I'm not. I mean, I don't have any gut feelings about wanting to preserve finance. Farming, I should have said, or fishing. I don't have gut feelings about those. I like how pretty the island is, and obviously that's there because of a process that has taken place over a very long time. Everything about the landscape is man-made. It's all been interfered with. It's not to say there's natural land is not so. The farming industry is based upon activities which are not really viable anymore. They're finished. They're looking for other uses. But out of all that, if we're stuck with finance, which again may or may not be temporary, or it may be a long-term project, I just don't know. Is it viable? Is the island viable? Economically?
It depends how you draw your definitions. Personally, I think that the whole of the world, and it's not just Jersey or Britain, should be moving towards a more sustainable type of living, which doesn't have to generate huge profits or huge growth. If we're realistic and blunt about the benefits of the last 40 years of the finance industry being in Jersey, I can't hand on heart say that those benefits have actually been fairly shared, equally shared, or even shared by all members of the population. And we're starting to see some of those home truths kind of come home. When our youngsters have to be committing to never being able to own their own property, because we're seeking to preferentially sell those properties to incomers, either as an off-island investment or for people who we know being attracted to the island to work in the finance industry to contribute positively to our tax system is one thing, but it's not fair, because in essence our Jersey children have got to either migrate themselves to another country and take their skills,
which of course is a traditional Jersey way of migration,
or actually stick up for their share, their fair share, in a way that they've never done before.
Do you think, sustainably talking, is Belle-Île in fact the model which Jersey should have stuck with?
I think it should have done, and I think it's the same issue for a whole host of other places, right? You can't with finite resources continue to actually exploit those resources, and only to actually allow those at the top of the tree to actually benefit from them.
Of course, it's a very competitive business to be in anyway. So
now, I'm not saying that everybody should be given the same, right? But I think the difference between the top and the bottom should be less pronounced. So there's the differentials. And in some societies, they manage to do that, but we can see that with modern pressures in Japan, for example, where you've had firms being set up where the boss of the organisation will be paid maybe 3, 4, 5 times maximum the lowest paid. The American system is to have it unlimited. Yeah, and that's not really a good system.
We're going to have to finish it, for sure. But fun enough, the scrutiny thing that was on today with the Chief Minister, he was being asked about pace because there's strikes going on in this island, as we know at the present time. He was being asked about how do you determine what is a fair pay for people at the lower end, people who are doing the more basic jobs. How do you compare that with the sort of salaries? Obviously, Charlie Parker was sitting there.
Well, this is very interesting because a number of countries, particularly the Scandinavian ones, in Norway, for example, they've just run a year-long experiment with a living wage. So they're paying everybody, whether they have an extra job or not, or other employment or not, an element of money that's centrally collected and equally shared, enough to actually cover your outgoings, to pay for your food and the roof over your head. And I think that's possibly a good model to be following, or at least to be researching, to the effect that if you want to go out and bust a gut and be a footballer, £1 million a year or whatever they pay these people, then fine, right? But that's not the model for everybody. And if you're coming together in a society that requires people to collectively contribute towards the running of the country, then it's only fair that everybody should have a reasonable expectation of having a sensible share of those services.